going to start with a confession. Because I know that you're all here today to talk about creativity, but I've never considered myself to be creative, at all. Can I get a show of hands? Is there anyone else in here that has ever felt like they weren't as creative as they wished they were? Oh, okay, all right, I'm in good company. Okay, out of interest, keep your hands up if you think I can change your mind in the next 15 minutes. All right, challenge is accepted. So when I say that I am not creative, it is not through want of trying and failing on many occasions. So when I was a teenager, I wanted to play the guitar. It was the 90s, so I saw myself in a glamorous, all-girl pop rock band, kind of like the Spice Girls, but with instruments. But despite my initial enthusiasm, I very quickly became overwhelmed because you've got the reading of the music, and you have to learn the finger positioning and the notes and the chords, and trying to make that sound like anything that resembles a song. Oh, it was just all too much. So in what was an embarrassingly short amount of time, both my rock star ambitions and the guitar were put away for the foreseeable future. And that wasn't my only attempt. I decided that I wanted to learn how to draw. So I've always loved fashion. Okay, for full transparency, when I say fashion, I do mean shopping, but it's basically the same thing. So I had decided that fashion sketching could be my new personality. So I did what any normal person would do, and I spent a small fortune on about 8,000 pens and downloaded as many YouTube videos as I can, and I taught myself how to fashion sketch. But it turns out, being able to draw really pretty clothes, but not having the pretty clothes at the end of it, makes it really dull. So those pens now drying out in a drawer somewhere and bought out for the occasional child's entertainment only. And there was also photography and knitting and crocheting and baking and children's stories and poetry, and just nothing ever seemed to keep my attention for very long. Focus has always seemed like this alien concept that other people could master, but I couldn't. And although I am making light of my failed attempts, in reality, I have spent a lifetime feeling embarrassed and ashamed of all the things that I couldn't seem to do. And not only that, my life felt like it was in chaos, because I was always forgetting things. I was always late for the things that I didn't forget, and nothing I started ever seemed to actually get finished. And it felt like a personal failing, right? Because other people could do these things. So why couldn't I? I obviously just wasn't trying hard enough. My confidence was in the gutter, and I have spent most of my adult life in and out of therapy, trying to build on what little self-esteem I had left. My name's Lerin Clare. Some of you might not be shocked to hear that in my 40s, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And it was really helpful for me to understand how my brain works, because my brain is wired for novelty and interest, but not so much for importance. But the problem was, as helpful as the diagnosis was, it didn't magically change me. I still had to learn how I was going to get by in this world, and in order to do that, I had to learn how to focus. Because here's the thing. We can't be creative if we can't focus. Da Vinci would never have painted the Mona Lisa if he got bored after 20 minutes. So in order to understand the things that impact our creativity, we first need to understand the things that impact our attention and whether or not they can be changed. And here's what I found out. You see, attention is kind of misunderstood. From a really young age, we tell our children to focus. Just pay attention, as if it's entirely within their control to do so. But after 40 years of trying to convince my brain to cooperate, I had to concede that attention is about more than just willpower. And I'd really like to show you what I mean. So, in a moment, I am going to say go. And when I do, I've got 2 rules for you, okay? The first rule is that you can think about anything you want to, but under no circumstances can you think about a purple bear. Second rule, if you do think about that purple bear, then I want you to be honest, pop your hand up for me. Okay, simple, right? Just don't think about the purple bear. Okay, go. Ooh. Wow, okay. I think that was about 5 seconds on average. But was that a problem with your willpower? Because I told you not to think about that purple bear. One small thing, I can change where your attention goes. Willpower or not, you can't help but be impacted by what I said. So, hopefully you can all see that attention is about more than just what we think of as being important. Other factors have to play a role. So I'd like to talk to you today about 2 of the things that impact our attention. The first of these is the motivation and reward centers in the brain, with a key role being played by the chemical dopamine. Don't worry, I'm going to keep it super simple, because all that we really need to know is that it means that if a task is rewarding, fun, interesting, novel, then our brains are wired to direct attention towards it. Conversely, if a task is not very rewarding or kind of dull, then it's going to be much harder for us to pay attention to it. So it's the reason why you can spend an afternoon thinking about a bar of chocolate that you've got waiting at home for you, but you're probably not giving the same level of attention to the bag of salad that's in the fridge, right? Because the chocolate feels much more rewarding, and so our focus will naturally drift towards it. The second thing then impacting our attention is our cognitive load. So what this means is that we all have a limited amount of cognitive space at any one time. And when this cognitive bandwidth is taken up by trying to remember too much, having too many distractions in the environment, or feeling stressed and overwhelmed, then we simply don't have enough capacity to think about all the things that we want to. Anyone else in here ever have to turn down the car radio so they can see the road better? Cognitive load. Okay, so it is much more rewarding for you to be listening to your guilty pleasure song on the radio, and we do not have enough capacity to read a map and be driving at the same time. So these 2 things, our motivation and reward centers and our cognitive load, impact everybody in this room, regardless of your neurotype. But in ADHD, these things are more extreme. It's the difference between trying to get a dog or a cat to pay attention. The dog might get distracted, but with some hard work and treats, they normally get back on track. But the cat, well, they're probably going to stare at you, knock your phone off the table, and go and take a nap so that they've got enough energy to climb the curtains at 3 a.m. Attention is technically possible in both, but one needs a lot more convincing than the other. And my ADHD brain needs a lot more convincing than most people's to pay attention. But that's not the whole story. You see, studies have shown that when an ADHD brain is in the right environment, it can show unusually sustained and intense focus. And in my experience, that's an understatement. So a friend recently suggested that we could go to Japan on holiday. There is no word of a lie when I tell you that within 24 hours, I had produced a 56-page PowerPoint presentation that outlined a route across South Korea and Japan, including flights and trains, accommodation options in each of the cities, and activities that we could do along the route. Naturally, it was also linked to an interactive map and a fully costed financial spreadsheet. You've got to feel for my friend who was on the receiving end of that presentation. But here's the thing. The reward of this once-in-a-lifetime holiday meant I could be laser-focused and I could find creative solutions to finding my way across a country that I've never been to before. And there's also the time that my sister called me just as I was about to get on a plane. And she asked me if I could write a song that we would later perform on Dragon's Den via the medium of puppets. That's a long story. But as soon as I sat down, I set to work. And when we landed 2 hours later, I had a completed song to send her. This is the same brain that was too overwhelmed to learn a few chords on the guitar. But when there were no distractions, nothing else to do, I could focus. So, you see, creativity isn't something that we simply have or do not have. It is something that we can nurture when the environment is right. And because an ADHD brain is more impacted by these things and shows a faster and more extreme reaction in either direction, then it's the perfect lens for us to understand the factors that impact our attention and creativity in everyone. Because if we can create a system that works for an ADHD brain, then we create something that works for everyone, even those of you who are better at hiding its effects. So, how do we create an environment that is going to help us to focus and boost our creativity? Well, we need to reduce that cognitive load, and we need to learn how to activate those motivation and reward centers. So, we can do this with ease. Externalize, anchor, simplify, and energize. Ease. So firstly, externalize. So this is where we reduce the amount that we are trying to remember by outsourcing that task into the environment around us instead. So we can do this using checklists or to-do lists. We can set timers and alarms. And we can even just leave the things that we need to remember in the place that we're going to need them. Because when our brains aren't busy trying to remember everything, then we have enough capacity to focus on the task at hand. Next up is anchoring. So this is where we need to reduce those internal and external stressors in order to stay regulated enough to focus. So, when we are stressed, our attention naturally goes towards the threat in order to try and keep us safe. But we can mitigate the effects of that by trying to calm our nervous system. And we do this by taking a walk in nature, practicing breathing techniques or mindfulness activities. And we also reduce those external stressors, such as too much noise or harsh lighting. Thirdly, we can simplify. So when a task feels overwhelming, or it's ambiguous and unclear, has too many choices to be made, then it takes a lot of processing power for us to understand even where to get started. And that can lead to us procrastinating or just not ever starting the task at all. So what we need to do is chunk that task down into smaller, more manageable, more easily to understand steps and reduce the amount of choices. And what that does is it reduces the amount of processing power that we need and enables us then to stop procrastinating and stop feeling quite so overwhelmed. And then lastly, we energize. So this is where we are activating those motivation and reward centers, including dopamine. So we do this by having something that is more rewarding, something we are passionate about, something that's more interesting or more urgent. So, for example, we can pair the task up with something that we are really passionate about. Or we can add something new and interesting into a task that's otherwise a bit mundane. We can also add urgency by using competition and deadlines. So these 4 steps will be understood by anybody in here who has ever had the indignity of having to do flat pack furniture. Because you need simple, clear, written instructions, as few steps as possible, and the ability to know when to breathe and take a break. And we're only going to get around to it when we are really desperate for somewhere to sit. So you see, we can all be more creative with ease. Externalize, anchor, simplify, and energize. So I use these 4 steps in order to create environments that work for an ADHD brain, because they are more impacted by these factors. But it can be used by anybody in here to reduce those factors that are going to divert our attention and hinder our creativity. So, you see, I hope, that creativity isn't something that you simply have or do not have. It is something that your environment allows. But more than that, when we stop labeling ourselves and instead start working in a way that suits our brains, something remarkable happens. Because after years of feeling broken, I started to realize that my lack of focus wasn't a personal failing. I just didn't know what I needed in order to succeed. Instead of feeling like I was incapable of doing anything well, I started to realize just how incredible my brain could actually be. Because without it, I would never have performed a singing puppet show to Deborah Meaden. I'd never planned a once-in-a-lifetime trip across Japan. And there is no way I would be standing up here today. Working with my brain has unlocked some incredible opportunities. Nothing changed about my brain, but everything changed about how I worked with it. And when I realized that, my confidence finally improved. So you see, when we change the way we work, we don't just unlock our creativity. We can actually change the way that we see ourselves. Thank you.